G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today I thought it would be an interesting exercise to have a look at trying to rank the 10 best performed West Coast Eagles so far in 2024. Now we've just had our first one of the year, beaten Richmond, some outstanding individual performances, positive buzz about the Eagles right now, which is great. And I'm obviously hoping, like all of us, that it lasts longer than a week, and it does feel a little bit different this time. So I felt like it would be a good chance to take stock of what we've seen in the first 5 weeks and analyze who really are our biggest performers right now. There's a lot of hype on certain performances. I think some other players have probably gone under the radar. I've gone for a fairly statistical approach with this as well, and I actually learned a little bit while doing it. Like, there's certain players that will feature in my top 10 best performed Eagles that I don't think I've even said their name on this channel so far this year, or at least, since the season started. I haven't really highlighted them. And you look at the stats and it's quite telling. And it's also interesting to look at the age demographics of the top 10 perform, but we'll get into all of that. So I'm going to start from the top and work down bottom, because I feel like when you make a video like this, you kind of leave the more interesting part to the end. I feel like there's some consensus on who the best performed players are, at least right at the top of the tree. It's moving down and seeing who's been the best after that, which I found more interesting. And I'm going to say that our best performed player is definitely Elliot Yeo. The guy's been unreal, obviously coming off the back of a 15 clearance performance against Richmond. Absolutely unreal, but his stats are pretty solid, and he's been consistent all year. So 26 disposals a game, 8.6 clearances. That's quite elite. 6 tackles, 5 inside 50, 7.6 score involvements. The only thing he needs to clean up a little bit is disposal efficiency, but overall, he's been an absolute workhorse. I have been praising him all year. I'm not the only one. People are now talking about him as an All-Australian contender, and I think that's about right for what we've seen for 5 weeks. So hopefully he can stay on the park. And closely following him is Jeremy McGovern, who has been unreal and possibly a little bit unrecognised in the media, which is fine. But it's been 5 weeks, 22 disposals a game, 7 marks. He's starting to put up Shannon Hearn level numbers. He's actually winning a fair bit of the ball. He's 4th in the league for rebound 50s as a key position defender. He uses the ball at 85% this year. That's unreal, because unlike some other key defenders, he doesn't use the ball super conservatively. Like, he actually takes the game on to some extent with some attacking kicks, nothing like Lewis Jetta-like, but his ball use is pretty good for a big man. 85% is unreal. 410 meters gained for a player of his position is rock solid, and 8 intercepts as well. So those two, in my opinion, stand alone as the 2 best performers for us this year. After that, it gets a little more subjective in my opinion. I'm going to highlight Tim Kelly here, and I realize that he's probably not going to feature third from everyone else. But I do think his work rate and his intensity has been fantastic. His impact hasn't been to the same level as the 2 mentioned above it, but he does work tirelessly. He has been shut out of quarters for a little bit here and there, and his ball use and radar hasn't been good. But his ball use percentage sounds funny, disposal efficiency of 71% is still, a fair bit better than Yeo's, although he's winning the ball more uncontested slightly than Yeo. But 5.6 clearances, 6 tackles, and 6 score involvements, rock solid. I think Tim Kelly has worked so hard over the last few years when the team's been going poorly. Again, he's still looking a little scrappy, but I'm still really appreciative of the efforts of Tim Kelly. So then the 4th best player on our list this year is also a little bit murky, and this is again going to be tough to decide. I'm going to shout out Jake Waterman. Now, off the back of a 6-goal performance, he's kicked 12 goals from 5 games this year, comfortably leading goal kicker. I haven't even looked that up. I'm going to assume it's the case. 7 marks a game and 15 touches, and I think comparing him statistically to the player next, it doesn't really stack up that well, but I do think playing in a harder position, roaming third tall forward, sort of like a makeshift key forward at the moment out of necessity. He covers a lot of ground. He works tirelessly again. And again, a harder position than some of these guys playing in the back half to rack up stats. But I want to highlight Jake Waterman. I think he's probably been, from the eye test, our 4th best Eagle this year. So this is where I'm going to acknowledge a player that I probably have been a little bit harsh and critical of this year, but he's actually, when you look at it, had a rock solid year. These are only stats, but Liam Duggan has actually had a really good year in an all-round sense in his role. So he's had 23.6 disposals a game, which puts him, top 2 or 3, I think, on our list for this year. Out of those 23.6 disposals, 18 of those are kicks, and when you factor in he goes at 77% disposal efficiency, that's actually really damn good. Again, stats are just stats. For me, I think when I think of Liam Duggan this year, what sticks out in my mind is a few horrific turnovers that you don't want to see from a senior player, and they've been under little pressure. He is prone to those. He is error prone, but what he does add does make up for it. I've just been a little bit harsh on him. This has been fairly eye-opening when you consider his overall game has been well-rounded. 4 rebound 50s a game, 4 inside 50s a game, nearly 500 meters gained per game, and 8 marks, and I think 4 intercepts as well. So sure, the mistakes have stuck out in my mind, but that is rock solid and probably clearly a top 5 Eagle this year. You could even have him third, I reckon, if you wanted to. I'm going by the eye test, what I've seen. I have him 5th, but gee, he's actually been okay, despite me thinking he hadn't had a great year. Coming in at number 6 is a guy who won't get the media recognition, but has had a great year, and on stats it's really hard to prove it. But Brady Hoff, I think, will go at least the next best player, in my opinion. And again, probably could be top 5, because it's his defensive efforts, rather than what he's doing with the ball in hand, that has really gone a long way to us improving this year, specifically being able to shut down opposition small. So Toby Green, 2 goals, Waitman, 2 goals. Both of these players are unreal. Waitman kicked 6 the week before. He kept Tom Papley goalless and kept him to just 10 possessions. I believe he was playing on Bolton against Richmond, and Bolton did have the edge on him, definitely. I think he had 3 goals, 21 touches. So yeah, lowered his colours in that particular game, but if you're rewarding consistency, then Brady Hoff is the next best player. Then I've got Harley Reid in 7th. Now, some might say he should be higher. Again, we're looking at the whole 5 weeks holistically. And I think Harley Reid's put in 2 unreal performances. And the first 3 weeks was sort of a slow build-up, okay? So if we consider impact over the entire 5 weeks, I have to have Brady Hoff higher. But Reid's stats are pretty good. So 18 touches a game, and there's also split evenly between contested and uncontested. So we know he's a really good contested player. For an 18-year-old, what he's doing, like fending blokes off, breaking tackles, is unreal. But he's actually really dangerous on the outside. So I don't really want to see him permanently as this inside bull, like what Yo's doing right now. We want to see him maybe as a first possession midfielder, sort of breaking through like a Ben Cousins. But either way, showing really good balance, which is outstanding. 5 clearances, 79% disposal efficiency, 5 score involvements, and there's stuff that the stats won't tell you, where Harley Reid will win a clearance and then run 40 metres, kick it 50. Like, he's a real 80, 90 metre player sometimes. Breaks tackles. I don't need to sell you on Harley Reid. He's been fantastic. And I would say the 7th best player with a real potential to shoot higher than this because of the trajectory he's on. He will be inconsistent. It's hard to predict the future with an 18-year-old, but he does have some confidence now, and I do think that these sort of performances, maybe not against Richmond, that won't be his baseline. That would probably be, some of his best games, but maybe what we saw against Sydney, that could become closer to his baseline. Jade Hunt comes in at 8th for me. On the eye test, I thought he'd probably be a little bit higher. I think he's been fantastic, but it's hard to make the case statistically. He averages 17.6 disposals a game, which is less than Reid. 481 metres gained, that is more than Reid, and 4.4 score involvement. So statistically, Harley Reid has had a better year on averages, but Jade Hunt does add so much. He's pretty consistent, he's fast, he's tenacious, he works hard, and that's enough for him to be the 8th best player. Now, the last 2 players are players that I don't know if I've really thought they've had amazing years, but that probably just speaks to our lack of depth at the top end. Okay, so I have the 9th best Eagle this year as Tom Cole. Again, I don't know if I've mentioned him once in reviews. I did think he played well. I think it might have been against Sydney, but I failed to mention it in a review. But he's actually had a pretty consistent year. 16 touches a game. Uses the ball at 75%, 3 tackles, 235 metres gained. The thing with Cole and ranking this highly is just that he's been pretty solid, whereas others might have looked better at times but fallen away. Tom Cole's been rock solid, and he's pretty much doing his job at the moment. And then at 10th is Jamie Crips, and I don't know if I've really thought Jamie Crips has had an unreal year. I think he's been solid again, but again, this kind of speaks to the lack of depth of the top end that we have right now. 14 touches a game, a goal and a half, 2 tackles, 6.4 score involvement. So again, he's just doing his job. He's a veteran, pretty solid performance from that. But what comes after this top 10 is probably a bunch of young players who've had good flashes but haven't quite put it together, whereas Jamie Cripps has again been solid. So I did also consider a honourable mention here for Ruben Ginbey. Again, hasn't set the world on fire, seems to be doing better at finding the footy and then dropping off for quarters here and there. But 5 tackles a game is rock solid as an inside mid, and 15 touches a game. So slight improvement on last year without being outstanding, and I couldn't make the case that he's adding more than Crips or Cole at the moment. So looking at this list in full, 8 out of those 10 are senior players to some extent, guys who are over 25. Jake Waterman, I think, is 25, turning 26 this year. Brady Hoff and Harley Reid are probably the two genuine youngsters there, and it's amazing that we have an 18-year-old in this list. And this is the way the list should look, to be honest. You know, your Mareks and your Longs and your Chesses, I think, still have some genuine ability. Likewise with Jinby, but they just haven't quite put it together yet. But that's okay, because we do want a top 10 looking like this, and it's nice to have a couple of youngsters recognised, well, at least in my top 10. Also, what's interesting is looking at how many players missed significant footy over the last couple of years. Like Elliot Yeo's barely gone to the park, and when he hasn't been fit. Now, Kane Collins will say that's a lack of preparation. I think that fails to recognise the fact that Yeo hasn't really had a pre-season and he's been rushed back, and I don't think that's necessarily on him. He's had to do what he's had to do off a low fitness base, and I don't think that's because of his own fault, and he's been playing, kind of as a defender as much as anything else up until this season. And McGovern has had a couple of horrible injuries, like crushed ribs, I think it was one of them, and then the high hamstring tear last year as well. Tim Kelly's been pretty much in the side. Jake Waterman showed flashes last year of improvement. I remember he kicked 4 against the Giants, and then he had their illness last year. Liam Duggan's been mostly in the side. I think he has missed some footy, but comparatively not quite as much as others. Brady Hoff has been more or less in the side, and he's approaching that 40-game mark now. I think he might have played 35 or so. Harley Reid, a first-year player. Hunt's been in the side. Cole has barely played, and Crips has been, probably out of the side for half of it with that broken ankle last year. And I think the year before that, he might have torn his pec in the preseason. I think that was 2022. So long story short, you're adding 4 or 5 of our best 10 players back into our side, and that's clear the impact it's had on our improvement. And you also factor in, I'd expect Liam Ryan and Oscar Allen to come in and feature in the top 10. Dom Sheed would be a chance as well. So yeah, I thought this was a helpful snapshot to see who our best performers are this year. But let me know in the comments what you agree with and disagree with. Who did I sell short? Who did I overhype? And which players will be able to shake up this list with improved performances. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.